when we think about democracy, I think one of the hallmarks that sets democracy apart from totalitarian states is a right to dissent and a right to protest without consequence. And I absolutely support that. But I think, and we've seen this particularly with the government's announcements on extremism recently, it's generated a lot of debate and a considerable bit of pushback because people don't agree with the definition of extremism. Now, I have always said that when new legislation is introduced, it has to be closely scrutinised because once legislation is passed, it's hard to overturn. So I've always said that it needs to be closely scrutinised. But frankly, there's also been a lot of scaremongering from groups like Greenpeace and others who are falsely implying that all rights to protest have been taken away. At least that's the impression you would get if you look at their propaganda advertisements. It's like you'd think that we're suddenly living in Russia, with their so-called election this weekend. You'd think it's that sort of situation. Um, I think because of the nature of some of the so-called protests that's taken place in this country, it's absolutely right that the government responds to that because they're reflecting what many, many people feel. And, when we talk about rights of protesters, let's never lose sight of the fact that the vast, vast majority of people are not out on the streets protesting, they're just trying to go about their lives. I mean, this is the reality. Um, yes, there is a right to protest, there's a right to dissent, but there is also responsibility to fellow citizens. And I take the view that if you are part of a group that is deliberately, I'm not talking as a byproduct of the protest, but deliberately setting out to target the public, then that's crossing a line. And just so it's obvious where I lie, I think Just Stop Oil are scum. I really have contempt for them because, I mean, that's a harsh word to use, but that's honestly how I feel. I really don't like them. I think that they are sociopathic people. I think they have a callous disregard for what they're doing and, for what they're doing to other people because in their mindset, oh, well, it's all fine because I'm doing it for the planet. Now, that is the mind of an extremist because you can justify anything, literally, as long as you tell yourself it's for a greater good. That to me is the path to extremism because as soon as you start saying, well, anything justifies what I'm doing because it's for the greater good, then there's no self control, right? Um, and I do think it could be a path to, for example, acts of terrorist sabotage. To date, they haven't used violence in the sense that they haven't, thrown punches or planted bombs or anything like that so far. But they have taken pride from targeting the public. I'm talking about Ballet, I should be more specific. I'm talking about Just Stop Oil and such groups. And when the government then responds to this, people act all shocked. So you have a group of zealots who think they could do as they please. The government responds, and then you get this response not directly from them, but from some of their apologists who falsely imply, well, the government's taken away all our rights. Now, I'm not naive. I do not say that all legislation is, we should just blindly go along with it. Like I've been very clear about, all legislation needs to be closely scrutinised. But I do think when you get groups that are behaving the way they do, that's that's not legitimate at all. It's it's deliberately seeking to hurt the public. It's not trying to change environmental policy in any practical sense of the word. Um, and the thing I find troubling is if you try to talk to someone from Just Stop Oil, they never talk about their tactics. They always deflect. They always talk about, oh, but it's for the planet. We're all going to die in a couple of years. It's global temperatures are heating up. The government's committing genocide, and they throw this word around in such a casual and, in my view, tasteless way. Um, but I think what they do is unforgivable in terms of deliberately messing with people's lives. And, their apologists think this is trivial. They think that people not being able to get to funerals, not being able to get to medical appointments, um, not being able to enjoy sporting events, just live basically, is trivial. Remember, for a long time we were in lockdown. We gave up basic liberties for, something that the whole world was going through. Most people understood that was an exceptional situation. But these things are not, trivial things. Enjoying life, getting on with life, going to work, going to weddings, going to funerals. Those are not trivial things. It's all part of life. So the callousness that Just Stop Oil activists have to just trivialize that like it's okay. Oh, well, I'm stopping you missing your father's funeral, but it's for the greater good because I'm trying to save the planet. That mindset is, to me, abhorrent. Um, and, looking at more recent events with the pro-Palestinian rallies now, maybe I haven't been clear enough in previous videos. That's my fault. I do not believe that everyone at the pro-Palestine rallies is an extremist by any means. I think there are people who are genuinely moved at the awful situation out there. You'd have to be made of stone not to be troubled by the number of civilians dying in Gaza. And I am getting increasingly uneasy with Israel's actions. So I think it would be wrong to smear all pro-Palestinians as, extremists. That would be wrong. But undeniably, there are Hamas sympathizers among them. That's without question. And I think openly supporting Hamas absolutely should be a criminal offense. It's a terrorist organization because they deliberately murder civilians. That's, by any reasonable definition, terrorism. Um, and it's not just that they're against Jews and Israelis. They're deeply anti-Western in their worldview. So I don't think that people who have that sort of deep animosity towards this country should be given a free ride. That's my honest view. I just don't think they should be given a free ride. But we do have to be careful not to generalize all pro-Palestinians as one and the same. It's not the case. Um, and indeed, increasingly, there's been Jews who've been protesting what Israel's doing. So it's I've always said this conflict is not black and white, and it shouldn't be presented that way. Um, but what I want to underline in this video is there's a lot of talk about rights, and yes, rights are very important, but so is responsibility. Now, protesters might say, "Oh, but I am being responsible because I'm thinking of the future. I'm doing this for my children." That's a favorite line that they like to use. They don't care about other people's children. They don't care about messing with other people's lives. But we need to get away from this mindset that a small minority ultimately somehow should have more rights than the majority. Because if you take all the protesters in Britain, whether they be environmental, whether they be to do with the war in the Middle East, whatever it is, it still amounts to a minority of people, whether they be on the left or the right. Now, I've been in protests in the past, but I think there's a difference between protesting because you're angry about something and being a professional protester where you take pleasure in being arrested, where you almost want to be arrested, where you go out of your way to hurt the public. To me, that mindset is something else. It's not trying to create a better world. It's not trying to build bridges. It's just taking pride in being a rebel. I think a lot of them, need to grow up really, which is an understatement. But when I do find myself getting frustrated when I see these sort of advertisements about sign our petition, the government's taking away your right to protest. What about the rights of the majority? That's what we never hear about, the rights of the majority to go about their lives. That is also a human right. That is also something that is essential to democracy. Because if you have a situation where people think they can do whatever they want as long as they hide behind protest, then you have anarchy. All countries have laws. All countries, um, well, all functioning societies should have a basic understanding that there are responsibilities as well as rights. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of the debate we've seen around this. But I don't shy away from saying what I think of the likes of Just Stop Oil. I think their behaviour is repugnant, um, and I think that, well, I don't want to give them more attention than they deserve. They've been somewhat less active this year than in previous years, but so maybe they finally fizzled out. I don't know. I wouldn't bet on it, but I don't know. I just feel that in a democracy, everyone should be allowed a voice. Now, I'm outspoken on this channel. I'm political. I have a lot of strong views, particularly regarding crime and justice. So I'd be a hypocrite to say that I'm just content with everything. And, my issue here is not about saying people cannot be angry, people cannot have strong views. Um, I'm not even saying, people should be polite or passive or sit down and have a nice civilized conversation. I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying protest does not equate to, the right to protest does not equate to somehow being feeling that you're free to break the law as you please or you're free to mess with people's lives. It should not be about that. And I think too many people seem to think it is. Um, like, time and time again, we hear this from their apologists, like, oh, but this is a precious right that they have to be allowed to protest. But we never hear about the rights of others. What about that? Anyway, I'll wrap this up because it's late, but sometimes I'm grateful I don't live in London because it's mostly Londoners have to put up with this. Although it happens in other big cities too. But, I live in a part of the country where it's less sort of vocalized, and there's some advantages to that. But I don't know. I just feel that there's too much that goes on. There's too much of focus on rights and not enough on responsibilities to others.